What just happened in court has everyone stunned. Sean Diddy Combs, one of the most iconic figures in the music industry, found himself at the center of complete courtroom chaos. It all started as a routine day of testimony, but within minutes, everything spiraled out of control.
At the end of the proceedings yesterday, you had 45 prospective jurors secured for selection, and of that group, meaning what I'm saying is they're going to move forward to the next stage of the process when court resumes on Friday. Of that group, you're going to have 12 jurors who are selected and 6 alternates who are selected. There's going to be a combination of preemptory challenges from the prosecution and the defense to whittle that number down, but it's going to be interesting to see what ultimately happens, because this selection process has delved into very sensitive topics. Each juror had to be asked whether they or someone close to them had experience with sexual assault, harassment, domestic violence, maybe they've been accused of crimes, and they've been quite transparent. At least that's what it seems to have been. They've been transparent about these issues. And this case, by the way, has evolved significantly over the past several months. The indictment has been amended multiple times. There have been several superseding indictments. Right now, we have the third superseding indictment in which Combs faces 5 criminal counts. 1 count of racketeering conspiracy, 2 counts of sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Now, before we go any further into this and talk about what we can expect for tomorrow,
Diddy was on the stand, confident, collected, trying to defend himself against a mounting series of accusations. But then the prosecution brought the heat. Documents, transcripts, recorded statements. Every piece of evidence pointed to one chilling possibility. Diddy had lied under oath. Gasps erupted from the courtroom. The jury, normally instructed to remain silent and composed, couldn't hide their reactions. Some leaned forward, others exchanged glances.
so what were some of the highlights from this week of jury selection, and particularly when you were in the court?
Yeah, of course. I think the biggest highlight was just that everybody from all these different walks of life were inside that courtroom to pretty much be qualified to see whether or not that they can move into the next process as far as being an actual juror on this very, very high profile trial. I think some of the memorable moments for me were just one, the transparency amongst these prospective jurors. You know, they had to talk about, past trauma. They had to talk about where they had worked. They had to talk about their personal lives as far as whether or not they had kids, they're married. They had to talk about what type of publications and news outlets that they get their news from. They had to talk about, their social media habits, especially when it comes to this particular case. Like some of the prospective jurors did admit to, for example, doom scrolling, liking some posts that they perceived to be pretty funny, just about the case overall in general. Some people were very forthcoming as to whether or not they had seen any of the documentary. And surprisingly, a lot of these prospective jurors did say that they could be fair and impartial. And that's even including some who have even seen the CNN video.
A few visibly shook their heads. The judge banged the gavel repeatedly to restore order, but the damage was already done. What was supposed to be a controlled environment turned into a full-blown eruption of disbelief. And right in the middle of it sat Diddy, stunned, his team scrambling while his credibility took a direct hit. The prosecution didn't hesitate. They zeroed in on key contradictions between Diddy's sworn statements and prior evidence.
There's some notable moments of questioning of jurors yesterday. Let's talk about transparency, man. The first day, when you were in court on Monday, you had a juror who basically said that they admitted to stealing a wand at the Harry Potter shop at Universal Studios. I was like, wow, this level of transparency. But yesterday, the final day of whittling down the number to 45 jurors was interesting too, right? What were some of the exchanges?
Well, I want to take it back actually a little bit to Tuesday. There was this one exchange between the judge and a prospective juror just about marijuana usage, and that, the judge asked this individual, whether or not if they could abide by an order not to smoke marijuana throughout the course and duration of this trial, which again is 2 months. It's a lot of time, and this jury is not going to be sequestered. So they'll have the opportunity to go home every single day, do what they normally do, pick up their lives, but also not be involved with the case or anything like that, not look it up, not do any research, anything like that. But pretty much what this prospective juror did tell the judge is that they didn't think that they could stop smoking marijuana. Essentially, the judge had like a little laughing moment about that, and this juror was ultimately...
Public interviews, social media posts, text messages, even sealed depositions. They were all laid out in sequence, and it painted a troubling picture. They accused him of intentionally misleading the court. Perjury is a serious charge, and in this case, the implications could go far beyond this trial. If convicted, Diddy could face not only financial penalties, but potential prison time. That's how serious this is. Inside sources say the jury's reaction wasn't just spontaneous. It was emotional. One juror reportedly whispered,
It was really interesting to kind of see this whole process play out. And again, a lot of these jurors were very forthcoming just about, whether or not that they could, one, stop smoking weed during this type of trial, or two, just be transparent about,
Right.
just some of the trainings that they had that might kind of relate to this case.
And I'll highlight a few. I mean, you had one juror who apparently attended the same high school as Sean Combs decades ago. Then you had this, and I'll read actually the exchange. Have you communicated to others, posted your opinion on social media or online, or liked any social media posts about Mr. Combs? And there's one juror who answered no, and the juror said, I mean, I have not. Like, I've seen stuff online, but I never posted anything about it. And the court says, do you remember retweeting, like a meme, maybe a joke about Mr. Combs? And the juror apparently replied, more likely than not, yes. Like, I probably liked a comment or something like that realistically. And the court said, is there a reason why you didn't mention that kind of thing, liking that kind of thing? The juror responded, I just think I took it a little bit too literal than like thinking of like Twitter or whatever. And the court said, like, in what way? I apologize because
I can't believe this. While another turned away in disgust. Court officials had to pause the session to calm things down. Legal analysts watching from the gallery said they hadn't seen anything like it in years. And honestly, neither had anyone else. This wasn't just a courtroom moment. This was a cultural moment. A collapse of image. A disruption of power. The man who once controlled the room with his presence was now watching that room slip out of control.
jury questionnaire. When Judge Subramanian jokingly asked if he could focus, the man insisted he would, though prosecutors kind of expressed doubts about his personal discipline. He remained in the pool, however, but this was the exchange. I told you I was tired, man. When I came in here, I was tired. Court responded, why were you tired? Just to help me. Juror said, I have sleep apnea, and I kind of went to sleep late. I was binging on, catching up. What were you binging on? Let's see, what's the new one? The new Star Wars Andor just came out, so I was binging on it, so I fell asleep late. Let me ask you this. Are you on any kind of medication or any kind of treatment that would make it hard for you to concentrate during a trial? No, just stayed up late, and I was watching Andor. And the court responded, it's gonna be long days with a lot of people talking, a lot of things coming up on the screens. Are you gonna be able to concentrate and be well rested so you can be focused? I hope so. You know, it highlights a question that I have about, from what you've seen in the jury selection process, are these jurors want to even be there? I was talking with Ben Shu yesterday, who was Johnny Depp's lawyer. He said there were jurors who wanted to be on that case.
What's even more wild is that this entire meltdown could have been avoided. Multiple legal advisors close to the case warned Diddy's team to keep him off the stand. The risks were too high, but sources say Diddy insisted. He wanted to tell his story. He wanted to defend his name. What he didn't anticipate was that the prosecution had spent weeks preparing a timeline of events that would shred that story to pieces. And when they dropped those facts, the courtroom detonated. It wasn't just the jury reacting.
The eve of opening statements on Monday.
Oh yeah, opening statements are just a couple hours at this point away, and we expect a lot to come out from opening statements. But as far as Diddy, how he appeared in court today, I was honestly surprised he appeared in just normal casual wear. I thought because the jury wasn't going to be present today that there was a chance that he could be in MDC jumpsuit, but it's official. He's going to be in that casual sweater. It was navy again today with a white button-up undershirt. He had navy slacks on. Again, no belts, no shoes with laces. Didn't see his shoes or if he was wearing loafers or any of that type of sort. But considering, again, that we are just hours away from opening statements, 72 hours now at this point, that for the most part, Diddy appeared in good spirits. Now, I don't know if that's just a kind of a mask that he's portraying, just so that way when we report on these types of things that we can say things like Diddy seemed upbeat, he seemed confident, that type of thing. But as far as whether or not he appeared nervous or shaken or anything like that, that definitely wasn't the case.
Even the court stenographer had to pause briefly. Attorneys on both sides looked around in disbelief. The gallery buzzed with murmurs. And somewhere in the middle of it, Diddy's legal team quietly asked for an emergency recess. They needed time. They needed to regroup. But honestly, it might have already been too late. Now the media is having a field day. News vans lined up outside the courthouse. Reporters crowding the sidewalks. Everyone wants a quote. Everyone wants a reaction.
Ethnicity. They don't have to provide a reason. And I thought we were going to get the jury today. Not the case. What happened?
Oh, not the case at all. And I did not wake up at 4 o'clock this morning for them not to have a jury today. But yet I am here this afternoon. So for the most part, we did get some type of jury updates, and that being that 2 were actually struck for cause, that being number 295 as well as number 146. As far as 295 goes, the jury department received an email in these last few hours, and they wanted to strike her for cause, or this person for cause, excuse me, because they expressed issues, about personal well-being. The defense pretty much has kind of summarized it that this prospective juror, or non-prospective juror at this point, just didn't want to be on the case. Now, as far as number 146, let me clarify that, they had an actual open lawsuit with the city of New York. And, when we're talking about those sequestered questions that came out of Monday or in just the duration of this week during jury selection, some of these questions include, do you have any civil matters that are pending? Do you have any criminal matters that you have been or done with?
Social media is exploding. Hashtags like Diddy lied under oath and courtroom chaos are trending worldwide. Fans are divided. Some are still standing by him, refusing to believe he would lie. Others say they saw this coming for years, and a lot of people are just in shock, wondering how someone who built an empire on confidence and control could let it all fall apart so quickly. This moment will go down in legal and entertainment history. Not because of who Diddy is, but because of what it represents.
Prosecution's case, because so much, as we talked about already, has been under seal, has been redacted. We'll definitely now get a sense of what is this racketeering case? Who potentially are these victims? And let's get into that, or these alleged victims, because I understand there was a lot of discussion about victim 1 in this case. Victim 1, who plays a key role in arguably the whole case, but there's a sex trafficking charge dedicated to her, the racketeering charge she's a part of, the transportation to engage in prostitution charge is related to her. Now, talk to us about what the discussions were regarding victim 1, and would I be fair to say, Elizabeth, that we learned a little bit more information about victim 1 today, where we might really feel confident to say this is in fact Cassandra Ventura?
Well, what I can tell you about Jesse is that, obviously we are presuming that victim 1 is to be Cassandra Ventura Fine, that is AKA Cassie. I will say that I can confirm that I did see her attorney, Douglas Wigder, inside that courtroom today, just kind of eyeing all the proceedings and that type of sort. But, victim 1 was brought up in court many times today. For example, the government was talking about an exhibit, and this particular exhibit was
the fall of an icon. The unraveling of a carefully curated image. A courtroom filled with people who watched in real time as truth collided with reputation. And now, the consequences are stacking up. If the perjury charge sticks, the ramifications could be devastating. Judges don't take kindly to dishonesty in their courtrooms. This could mean sanctions. It could mean a total collapse of his defense strategy. And most importantly, it could mean more legal exposure down the line. Other plaintiffs, other prosecutors, other jurisdictions.
For the most part, it seems that the defense, at some kind of aspects and points of this case, have kind of been trying to paint this picture that Combs, in a way, he lives an alternative lifestyle. This is just, these are consensual relationships between, his former girlfriends and these escorts that are a part of, these freak-offs that the government is painting kind of his, discretions about. But as far as how this has to do with victim 1 is that the defense is pretty much going to tell these jurors essentially that there was mutual physical violence, domestic violence between the defendant, that being Diddy, and victim 1. And then the defense was even trying to paint the picture that this couldn't fall under the statute of sex trafficking because it wasn't coercive, or this wasn't under coercion or anything like that, because alleged victim 1 has strength and she is powerful. So why would she be coerced into doing these types of activities when, she's the one who has been aggressors in these types of domestic spats, as the defense is kind of trying to paint this as. And so they're pretty much going to be honest with the jury that there was mutual physical violence on both ends. So the jurors will know.
All watching this case closely. And if this alleged lie becomes a proven fact, they might be lining up next. Diddy's team is already shifting gears. damage control mode, crisis management, spokespeople issuing vague statements, lawyers asking the public to wait for all the facts.
That this witness worked for Bad Boy Records and worked with victim one, which is why we also can believe that this is Cassandra Ventura, because if you think back to the civil lawsuit, she had essentially said that if she didn't do what Diddy had wanted, essentially, that he would stall her music career. And so with this witness, the defense was saying that that's not necessarily right. This witness had made oral statements, not written statements, but this was essentially about her career and these conversations that they were having about victim one's career. And so the defense says that this could have been a personal conversation, but that is kind of unclear. But, you know, it was said in open court that this person named Mr. Cruz was victim one's manager. The government says that his conversation with alleged victim number one kind of falls into the heartland of this issue that they are going to be presenting to these jurors. And so essentially the objection was overruled. So, so we're going to be hearing a lot of things, which is why we can...
But that's the thing. Some facts are already out there. The inconsistencies, the contradictions, the visible reaction of the jury. That doesn't go away with a press release. Meanwhile, insiders say Diddy is rattled. For a man used to commanding the spotlight, this is a different kind of attention. The kind where silence speaks louder than words. He hasn't issued a direct statement since the courtroom incident. Not a tweet.
Medical records or anything like that?
So, Jesse, this was essentially just a conversation because, you know, despite these lawyers, that being the government and the prosecution versus, you know, the defense team, they've been very cordial throughout these entire proceedings, giving each other these professional courtesies as far as, you know, what they will talk about, what they won't talk about, you know, this issue is coming up, that issue is coming up, et cetera, et cetera. So when it comes to victim one, they came to the agreement essentially that victim one will not be cross-examined on medical topics. Now, as far as the full extent of what those medical topics are, you know, that is kind of unclear, but it seems like from the government's perspective that the defense will kind of abide by this professional courtesy and not necessarily cross-examine this particular witness just about these medical topics and medical records, which is also interesting because if you go back to the civil suit that Cassandra Ventura filed against Diddy, you know, it did talk about, you know, him taking her medical records or keeping them from her, and that...
Not a video. Not even a cryptic message. Just silence. And that silence is being filled by speculation, analysis, and relentless media coverage. The courtroom will resume proceedings soon, and everyone is wondering what happens next. Will Diddy take the stand again? Will his lawyers pivot and try to dismiss the perjury claims? Will the judge issue sanctions?
Regarding their testimony or anything like that. As far as the conversation goes around alleged victim number 5, it was really about whether or not this person, this individual, will be using a pseudonym at trial. So what we do know is that the judge ruled that alleged victims 2, 3, and 4 could use a pseudonym. Obviously, we know there's been some issues and some hiccups with alleged victim number 3, and so, you know, whether or not this, or whether or not she will be testifying, that's still up in the air. The government's still saying that they are going to get an answer to both sides and to the court by the end of the day today. But as far as alleged victim number 5 goes, the judge pretty much said, you know, that this person cannot testify under a pseudonym. So what we will see is alleged victim 5's real name whenever this individual testifies in court, whenever they get that chance to for the government.
And any idea about who that might be? Because one of the questions that I believe also Lisa Bloom, who represents...
Or will the prosecution file new charges? Every possibility is on the table now, and every move will be under a microscope. Some people are calling this the biggest courtroom drama since the O.J. Simpson trial. That might sound exaggerated, but when you look at the media circus, the celebrity factor, the high stakes, and now the alleged perjury, it's not that far off. This isn't just a legal matter anymore. It's a public reckoning. A reminder that no one, no matter how powerful or famous, is above the truth.
No idea, but I do expect, you know, Don Richard to possibly testify in some type of capacity during this trial. I mean, Lisa Bloom wasn't in the courtroom today, but we do know that one of her legal reps or somebody who works with her at the office, at her law office, was inside that courtroom today. So it could possibly be, and of course I put possibly very big an emphasis there because, we just really don't know. But as far as Dawn Richard goes, I feel like she could also possibly play a huge key role in this case as well too, because even if you go back to her civil lawsuit against Diddy, who she had worked with for a number of years, all the way from Danity Kane to Dirty Money, she had said that she had witnessed in her suit that she had witnessed these physical violence and just more from what was happening behind closed doors while Diddy was in a relationship with Cassie. And then obviously with Dawn Richard, she also, had alleged that Diddy had kept her trapped inside the back of a car for 2 hours. She had to call her dad. It was the whole thing according to these allegations that were mapped out in her suit. But I expect that she definitely will play a role in some capacity when it comes to this trial. Now, whether or not she's alleged victim 5, that's unclear, but I guess we'll see what happens when this trial comes. So many twists and turns with it.
And let's preview a little bit for next week and for the continuing 8 weeks of this trial. First, about Diddy's legal team. For those who don't know, who comprises Diddy's legal team?
And then there's the question everyone is asking. Why would he lie? What was he trying to protect? Himself? His brand? His legacy? Or is this all just a misunderstanding? That's what his defense is arguing. That it's not perjury, it's confusion. Misremembered details, poor wording, context taken out of proportion. But the jury didn't seem convinced.
As far as Mark Garagos, he has been a kind of a controversial figure a little bit since these pretrial things have been kind of going on, and that is the sense that, he had made these comments on his podcast with TMZ, pretty much referring to the prosecution as, a six-pack of white women, and those were his words, definitely not mine. And that was something that the judge took pretty seriously when he had said that. That, to me, was an interesting thing for Mark Garagos to say in the first place, because after Anthony Rico quit and before Xavier Donaldson and Nicole Westmoreland were on the case, Diddy's defense team looked kind of similar to the prosecution there as far as in terms of diversity. So I don't know why he kind of had made that that statement in the first place, but the judge admonished him for that, calling his comments essentially like he can't say those types of comments. He can't say those types of things. It kind of violates the rules that we have here at New York as far as defendants.
And that might be the biggest problem of all. Juries matter. Their perception matters. And if they believe he lied once, how will they judge the rest of his testimony? How will they view the case as a whole? Trust, once broken, is almost impossible to restore. And in court, trust is everything. Without it, you've lost the room. You've lost the narrative. You've lost your footing. The next phase of this trial is going to be brutal.
Attorneys that Diddy has hired to represent him on his team, I think 7 out of 8 all showing up is pretty good odds to me.
When they say a high-powered defense team, that's exactly what it is. I pulled up a little bit of the exchange, though, between Judge Arun Subramanian and Mark Garagos. Subramanian saying, "I think this is ridiculous. I think referring to the prosecution in this case as a six-pack of white women is outrageous. This would not be tolerated in any court from any lawyer anywhere across the nation." Added, "You have one more listener for your podcast," because that's where apparently Garagos had made the comment. And Garagos quipped back, "As long as you subscribe, I'm all for it." Now, talking about the prosecutors, who are the prosecutors in this case, Elizabeth?
Well, so who do we know that's going to be on the prosecution? Obviously, we know that the head prosecutor, who is going to be pretty much the face that these jurors are going to see a lot when it comes to the government side of this case, is going to be Maureen Comey. Obviously, she has a famous father who had previously served, in an official capacity as well, too. It's kind of funny because, James Comey, Maureen Comey, and then you have Tinny Garagos, Mark Garagos. It's like Nepo baby lawyers inside that courtroom for this trial. And I just say that kind of jokingly. But as far as the other attorneys go, we have...
Expect more witnesses, more cross-examinations, more media coverage. The prosecution smells blood. The defense is cornered. And Diddy is in the fight of his life. His career, his freedom, his legacy, all hanging by a thread. And yet, in the middle of it all, there's still a sense of disbelief. How did we get here? How did it escalate so fast? How did one of the most successful men in entertainment end up facing accusations of perjury in a courtroom packed with reporters, lawyers, and a jury who couldn't hide their shock? We may never get a clear answer, but we are watching it unfold, piece by piece, as the walls close in.
Case, she likely will be the one who will be delivering opening statements on Monday as well too, and so those are just some of the lists. I think I forgot Emily Johnson as well too, but those are just some of the prosecuting attorneys that are going to be trying this case.
And before I let you go, Elizabeth, because I want to get you out of the rain, quick preview of what we can expect from openings on Monday, where each side lays out this case. If you can just predict what we might hear, what do you think the structure of this case is going to be for the prosecution and the defense?
Well, definitely the prosecution is going to paint this as, you know, Diddy had allegedly sex trafficked these victims. He used his power, he used his money, he used other members of the Combs enterprise, as they call it, to kind of help facilitate and continue doing these types of acts for decades. I mean, the superseding indictment kind of lays out decades worth of allegations. They're going to hammer on about the racketeering conspiracy, that being, you know, the Combs enterprise, again, as they call it. They're going to be talking about transportation to engage in prostitution, that being the Mann Act. They'll probably talk about, you know, how at some capacity it wasn't just Diddy hiring these escorts or anything like that. It was other members of his team that are going to be that were going to be hiring people.
No matter how this ends, one thing is certain. Diddy will never be the same again after this. Neither will his legacy. Neither will the system that once seemed too big to shake him. This isn't just about guilt or innocence anymore. It's about accountability. It's about truth. It's about whether the justice system will hold someone of his stature to the same standards as everyone else. And as of today, it looks like that process is finally underway. Stay locked in. This story is only just beginning.